Donald Trump's assault on due process, on people who are immigrants, on human beings that have various status within the United States, trying to put them into the dark, dank cells of El Salvador and other foreign countries, trying to whisk all of these people in the middle of the night to foreign jails to avoid federal court oversight. It's gotten the attention of the senior Democratic leadership in the House, including Representative Ritchie Torres. And I had the honor and pleasure to talk to him about Donald Trump's assault on immigration law and due process. The other thing that's of concern to our audience and that we talk a lot about is Donald Trump's assault on the immigrant and immigrant class. What he calls, we call them human beings here on Legal AF. And if they're in this country, as the Supreme Court has ruled 3 times already in the last 90 days, they're entitled to notice and due process and Fifth Amendment rights and habeas corpus rights in the United States before a federal judge. There's no way else to interpret that, whether it's 9-0, 7-2, or 6-3. That's the takeaway from those 3 decisions all run together. As we came on the air from last night, we got Jeb Boasberg, who's certified a class finally of all those people sent to El Salvador, not named Abrego Garcia, who are sitting in the CCOT, who were secreted away in the middle of the night, not because the check-in time at the El Salvadoran prison is 2 a.m., but to get them away from federal jurisdiction. And now with the Supreme Court's backing, and it's the only way to read those rulings, Boasberg said, I'm certifying the class. We're going to do the writ of habeas corpus and due process Fifth Amendment analysis here in D.C., and I'm giving the government 1 week from yesterday to give me the notice of what you're doing to facilitate their return in order to have those due process rights vindicated. You're a big advocate in this area as well. I know you proposed a bill related to somebody like Abrego Garcia. I don't know if you had a chance to read Boasberg's decision. Starts with a page and a half of Kafka's The Trial, lifting, right? That's the beginning. And then saying they are living a Kafkaesque nightmare, almost verbatim from Kafka's thing. I mean, and the fact that he's starting off that way before he gets to the other 68 pages tells you everything you need to know about how federal courts, like your leadership, are struggling to restrain a completely unconventional, out-of-control rogue president.
The key word that you used earlier was Article 1. Mm-hmm. Like Congress has to reestablish itself as the Article 1 branch because we have passed too many laws that have concentrated too much power in the executive. Laws like the Alien Enemies Act, which has enabled the president to deport hundreds of people without due process. So I see the authoritarian abuses of Donald Trump as much a product of congressional capitulation as it is of Donald Trump himself. And so for me, that's one of the lessons that we have to internalize from our experience of the Trump presidency. But of all the abuses, there's none more dangerous than his assault on due process. And there are Americans out there who are tempted to say, why should I care? He's only targeting immigrants. And I have a simple reply. Without due process, what is to stop the government from classifying anyone as a non-citizen gang member and abducting you in the dead of night and then rendering you to a torture chamber in El Salvador? Like the whole point of due process is a recognition that the government makes errors, it abuses its power, it falsely accuses, and due process is what protects all of us from abuses and false accusations. And so an attack on the due process rights of anyone is an attack on the due process rights of all of us. And Donald Trump is violating the most ancient doctrine of Anglo-American law, which is habeas corpus. Like there is nothing more foundational than the idea that the government cannot deprive you of your physical liberty without due process. And that idea he's disregarding with impunity, and he's ignoring an order from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ordered him to facilitate the release of Abrego Garcia, and he's all but ignoring it. And so I introduced legislation that would revoke federal funding for any foreign detention that has been deemed impermissible or illegal by a court of law here in the United States, including the Supreme Court. There needs to be an enforcement mechanism where none presently exist.
Absolutely. And then you just, Representative Torres, there's a debate going on now because buried in that big, beautiful abomination of a bill that got out just barely out of the House, but is over in the Senate, buried in the 500 pages midway through the bill, is this attempt at to legislate lawlessness by the Trump administration to avoid being held in contempt by judges, because Boasberg found him in probable cause for criminal contempt. It's on ice right now, and until a appellate court continues their review of the underlying decision. Judge Zinnes, she just gave permission yesterday to the plaintiffs for Abrego Garcia, the counsel for Abrego Garcia, to bring their contempt motion, and she will grant it. There is no doubt about that. And buried in that bill was a defunding mechanism that if any federal judge doesn't require a bond to support an injunction that relates even to a constitutional violation, then he can't find them in contempt for the violation of that injunction. And that led to there's a lot of hearings going on about that right now. What's your view and what's your position on that?
Look, the Orwellian big, beautiful bill is an ugly attack on the independence of the judiciary, which is the only institution that is holding the Trump administration accountable. Like, without judicial independence, without judicial review, Donald Trump is going to be even more emboldened in his corruption and presidential profiteering and abuse of power. I mean, we have a president who wishes to model himself after the likes of Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. He has no regard for the rules and norms of democracy. Like, he sees himself as a king, and he sees the rest of us as his subjects. And without due process, without judicial review, we have no means of vindicating our rights in a court of law. What good is a judicial order if there's no enforcement, if there's no ability to hold someone like Donald Trump in contempt?
Yeah, and the courts are going to have to ultimately deal with that if it somehow gets through the Senate and all that, and the reconciliation, which I'm hoping it won't. But
I see it as unconstitutional. I think it's
exactly
infringement on the Article 3 powers of the courts.
1,000%, and that's the way we teed it up here, and that'll be for public interest groups and other groups like Democracy Forward and all that to bring those to the court's attention. Thank God for the courts. And look, the Democrats are doing the right thing. They're putting them in the right courts. We're not filing these in Texas and Louisiana. We're filing them, in the original colony states and in Washington and California, Maryland and DC. Not because, look, he's losing in front of Trump-appointed judges as well.
That's the key point. Like, and you saw that he was lashing out at Leo and the Federalist Society because traditional conservative judges are now too moderate for Donald Trump. Like, his greatest concern is not loyalty to the law. It's loyalty to Trump, right? That's the criterion by which he's going to judge future jurists. And so I worry that he's going to appoint not just conservatives, but MAGA loyalists.
Oh, yeah. That's what's going
disregard the text of the Constitution in favor of the whims and will of Donald Trump.
1,000%. The fact that he untethered himself from Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society, the ABA, it's now going to be Stephen Miller picking his judges. And you're right, it's going to be that litmus test of loyalty and fealty to Donald Trump. He's been complaining privately. It's the leakiest presidency I've ever seen. He's complaining privately about the Supreme Court not adequately, even though they're all bought and paid for, in his view, at least the right wing. They're not supporting his policies. And then he's pissed off when the Court of International Trade and the Trump appointed person didn't agree with them that back to Congress giving the president too much power and need to take it back in the area of tariffs and IEPA. And so he's losing, just to make it clear to people outside of our bubble, he's losing because he's taking completely illogical, unconstitutional positions that judges who get paid to look at the law and the Constitution are calling him out on. He's losing, yes, 96% of his cases, but 72% of them are Trump judges. Leonard Leo gave me a bunch of duds. No, that's not the analysis, because he can't admit that his brain trust, and that's a heavy lift in that sentence, doing a heavy lift there. His lawyers around him, the Alina Habas and the Pam Bondis and the non-lawyer Stephen Miller and the rest have led him astray. This is why he's losing. This is why there's 65 plus injunctions against him. This is why even at the Supreme Court, he's batting 500, right?
But the question I have is the Supreme Court going to act with integrity? Like, the Supreme Court has made a series of decisions, whether it's establishing the major questions doctrine or reversing the Chevron doctrine, that in theory move our government in the direction of shifting power from the executive to Congress, in theory. So the question is are the courts going to continue to rein in executive power, or is an exception going to be made to embolden and enable Donald Trump? And that remains to be seen. It is, I think it does give me some hope that the Supreme Court unanimously ordered Donald Trump to facilitate the release of Abrego Garcia.
Right.
To see Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito part of that unanimous decision was shocking to me.
Yeah.
But it really speaks to the egregiousness of Donald Trump's lawbreaking, that it's so egregious that even Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas have to say, wait a minute.
If that 1 a.m. decision wasn't a wake-up call, or the 9-0 Abrego Garcia, the 7-2 was the 1 a.m. thing. But you're right. I joked that you can't get the Supreme Court to agree on their sweet greens order for lunch, let alone that Donald Trump just violated. Because at some point, just from an existential standpoint, they have to worry about them as an institution. And Roberts is nothing if not an institutionalist. Because the more attacks on the federal judiciary, its independence, its power. We're going to see what happens soon, Representative Torres. Maybe we'll have you back on when they finally issue the ruling about nationwide injunctions. It's wrapped in the birthright citizenship case, but it's really going to be about the ability of judges to do just what Judge Boasberg did, whether by class action or nationwide injunction, to make rulings on a constitutional basis, a finding a violation. Or are you going to make people file hundreds of thousands of lawsuits to vindicate their rights? I think I know where they're going to go based on the oral argument, but until it comes out, we really don't. So we're watching this struggle, right, for the soul of the Supreme Court and thereby the soul of America going on in real time at that court.
Well, no question. I mean, Donald Trump's presidency is a stress test for our democracy, and it's a stress test for the integrity and independence of the Supreme Court and the judiciary. And whether the Supreme Court will rise to the challenge of defending our democracy remains to be seen. But it's our best hope for reining in the lawlessness of Donald Trump.
I think Representative Ritchie Torres is one of our best hopes in terms of keeping Donald Trump's feet to the fire to guide us to a successful midterm result for the Democrats. We need a blue wave, blue bath, blue day. I don't care what you call it, but we need the House and the Senate back, certainly the House, in order to set us up for 2028 and rein in a lawless president. Representative Torres, proud son of the Bronx and representative from the 15th district. Loved having you on here. Our audience is going to be very, very happy and enthusiastic that you came and spoke to them directly. Love to have you back again.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah,
Take care.
Thank you very much. Representative Ritchie Torres speaking to us about all things Donald Trump and corruption here on Legal AF. Welcome back. You're on Legal AF, the YouTube channel. But then again, you knew that. I'm Michael Popok. Take a moment, hit the free subscribe button. Help us continue to grow this pro-democracy channel. By voting now, by hitting subscribe, you'll signal to me and to the rest of us what kind of content that you like, the more of the content that you like. And of course, we've got some amazing contributors, up to a dozen of them, all here on Legal AF. We've got Legal AF, the Substack. That's another way to support the show. You'll get some amazing information there as well, including all of the legal filings, all the court documents, all the analysis that you won't find anywhere else on Legal AF, the Substack. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.